school nutrition tender worth 10 billion rand has reportedly been put on ice by the Basic Education Minister, Siviwe Gwarube. The Sunday Times reporting today that she is unhappy with an attempt to create a single tender to provide daily meals to millions of school children across the country. Section 27's Matshidiso Lencoasa joining us in studio now to reflect on what the minister has essentially announced here. And Matshidiso, good evening to you and thanks for your time. Let's go straight to the heart of the matter, the integrity of the procurement process here. Is that in question, or are people overreacting?
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity. So I think that is a really good question about integrity, as corruption, as we've known in the past, has constrained the ability for the state to deliver quality basic education services, and it could be here if this is exactly what's happening. So what came up from the minister is that the minister had said that it was a whistleblower who brought this to their attention. And this is a red flag. It's okay, because this is a lot of money and it impacts so many learners. As we know, the school nutrition program, yes, it is basic education and administered by DBE, but it's also, it has implications for the right to nutrition, the right to healthcare. And when it works really well. But if it fails, as we've seen in other provinces in the past, like there have been glitches, it really does constrain our ability to realize quality basic education for the majority of learners in this country.
You're absolutely right about that, because we now have an experience of this in KwaZulu-Natal. That school nutrition program in that province hugely interrupted, meaning that children who rely on this meal throughout the day, if they don't get this meal, they don't get to eat, because the homes from which they come, they are unable to provide sometimes. So very important that the minister steps in. However, still sticking with the integrity of the process here, I read in the Sunday Times that this tender was quietly put out whilst the GNU processes were being negotiated. Was there something sinister there, you think, or the department officials were doing what they are meant to do, and that is the civil service must continue to work while the political processes continue their path?
Sure. So I think, again, another really important question for us to consider, because there's not enough information that's been out. We are also finding out and figuring it out. And when you have a tender of this proportion and this margin, and it impacts so many learners, I mean, that's 10 billion rand. Like, that is something very material. And if it were to go wrong, it would affect so many people. And so quietly issuing it is a red flag, as well as a whistleblower identifying it. I think that also happening before the procurement bill became the Procurement Act, when the president had signed it, because it proposed some procurement reforms that could prevent, tender disputes of this nature from playing out in the courts, and ensure that the delivery of, say, the school nutrition program is adequately, conducted. So even the timing also, for us, it's suspicious, and we're looking forward to further information about this.
Yeah. Is that a red flag? What is insinuated in the article, that this would be a single service provider who is going to now handle this, because this is all part of the modernization program of the school nutrition. So address those two parts, or those two elements, that at the heart of this is modernizing this nutrition program. What does modernizing it mean? But also, would a single service provider have the capacity to deliver?
So the NSNP, the school nutrition program, is currently administered at a provincial level. So each province either uses a centralized model or a decentralized model. And so the centralized model would be the province actually doing the procurement, and SMMEs would, be affected by that. And then a decentralized model would be the schools actually providing, directly procuring this. And so now we have an introduction to something even bigger, which is like now we centralize it at national level. And there are advantages to centralization. As you mentioned, modernization. There's also economies of scale. So there could be cost saving, and that could be used to extend the school nutrition program to weekends, to other learners who are also impacted, to ECD centers, for instance. But if it goes wrong, on a national level like that, especially as it begins, and if there are allegations or, whistleblower is seeing some, issues there, it means that so many learners would be affected because it's nationally administered.
Yeah.
So there is a balance to be done, but it does require some form of public participation as well, and so that it can be shaped in a manner that actually foregrounds the right to quality basic education services for the most marginalized learners in the country.
The Minister of Basic Education seems to be at pains to stress that she is not interfering in procurement processes. She is merely trying to provide oversight. And we know that contentious conversation sometimes where the politician is accused of interfering in administrative matters of the department. Do you think that she is on the money here, that she has to be seen to provide oversight in a matter that seems to be raising red flags?
I think that when you have a situation like that, the balance between administrative and political, at the end of the day, it is the right to quality basic education, to nutrition, that must be foregrounded. And if that means, if a whistleblower raises an alarm bell and says, hang on, we have some issues, it is important, and it is the duty of a public servant, including the minister, to investigate that, to ensure that there's proper budget oversight, because in that way we have better budget execution, and it prevents any disasters from happening before they happen. And it's so important, like I said, because the school nutrition program has so many implications to so many constitutional rights that I guess, working on cases that we do work on at Section 27 where that right is threatened, we've seen the impact of that and how important it is to protect the rights to basic education, especially in this fiscally constrained environment that we find ourselves in. But if we get this wrong, if there's something that goes wrong, we saw it at KZN last year, that was even at a provincial level. How can, we've seen it even in the Eastern Cape, there have been issues of that. And there are concerns about Gauteng NSNP rollouts as well.
Yeah.
But if this happens nationally, that really affects them, nearly 10 million learners. That is incredibly concerning.
Yeah, and just perhaps to end it on this note of pupils still being provided their meals at school, is that still ongoing? Is that going ahead without any interruptions while this process gets sorted out?
Yeah, so while we await further information regarding that, instinctively it would be the case because the school nutrition program has already been running at a provincial level already. So we can imagine that if this process were to begin, it would only start a few months later. I believe that the whole process started from the 22nd of March. So it's an ongoing process and it can't be overnight. And we would hope that it wouldn't be an overnight process to actually implementing. So I do not anticipate that it will cause a halt in the school nutrition program because it's already running. And, there are hiccups here and there, but for the most part, it is a policy intervention that is actually working. And it is also important that now with the procurement bill, the Procurement Act now that it's been signed, that we entrench our procurements of the NSNP around that and ensure that these kind of matters don't play out in court for long and it drags out, and then, before you know it, the rights to learners' basic education is also threatened again. So just hoping for the best in this, but we will also be monitoring as we should, because there are a significant number of red flags that have been raised.
Matshidiso Lencoasa, thank you very much for your time. She is with the organization Section 27.